These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.
Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Sunday, March 19th, 2023. And if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide, you can always go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. And if you point and click anywhere on this map, it'll pull up a forecast with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories. Looking at the map this Sunday afternoon, the most notable thing is this large area of purple across the southeast and southern U.S. These are freeze advisories. Temperatures are going to be getting well below freezing across this area of the Tennessee Valley and deep south into the Carolinas. Further north and west, we have a red flag warning for fire danger conditions there in Nebraska and northern Kansas, a scattering of winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories across areas of the Rockies, and then back toward the Sierra Nevada of California. And we have a storm to contend with here, especially on the west side of the state. A strong Bering Sea storm is going to be impacting areas now into Tuesday. We have winter storm warnings and blizzard warnings in effect for areas along the west coast. High wind warnings for the western and central Aleutians. As that system works its way eastward, it'll also impact the Pribilof Islands very late tonight and Monday morning. And then in the wake of some of the snow that fell in through the western Chugach and Kenai Mountains earlier this weekend, there still remains some high avalanche danger, especially if you're considering any backcountry skiing or snow machining. But here on the cameras of the FAA this afternoon, Nome, you can see the approaching storm cloud, just kind of this milky white along the southwest horizon. You're going to see conditions deteriorate very late tonight and especially early on Monday morning. Kipnik there in the southwest, the Kuskokwim Delta is going to see also deteriorating conditions here by Monday morning as this frontal system approaches. You can see the hints of it along the horizon there if you're looking south-southwest. Winds could gust as high as 50, 60 miles an hour there along the Atollin Strait, creating blizzard conditions. Further south and west on Alaska, Dutch Harbor, increasing cloud cover. The strongest winds are going to pass north and west of your location, but still it'll be a windy front that rolls through there during the day on Monday. And then Whittier, in the wake of the recent snows we saw here earlier this weekend, a few sprinkles, a little bit of rain spitting at you this afternoon with a temperature at 36. So here are the current warnings for the Aleutians. These are high wind warnings for the western Aleutians until early this evening, including Shemya, where gusts as high as 80 miles an hour could occur. Adak, that's for tonight into early Monday morning, wind gust of 75 miles an hour possible as the occluded front swings through there. And then as that front comes across the Pribilof Islands, wind could gust as high as 75 miles an hour there at St. Paul and St. George as we go through the early morning hours on Monday. And then that front will slam into the southwest coast, into the YK Delta, producing blizzard conditions at times with falling snow, blowing and drifting snow, greatly reducing visibilities. For areas along the southern and western Seward Peninsula, including St. Lawrence Island, winter storm warnings, and you can see near blizzard conditions at times develop on Monday as a result of that front working its way through this area. And then as the moisture spreads inland and the strong winds blowing snow, falling snow, especially on the southwest slopes of the Brooks Range and any other areas where you have some terrain for a southeast or south flow to butt up against, that's where you kind of get some little heavier snowfall. And then we have winter weather advisories for blowing snow in the northeastern Brooks Range for tonight into tomorrow morning, and then high wind advisory for the eastern Alaska Range, where south winds of 30 to 40 miles an hour could gust as high as 60 miles an hour, especially around Isabel Pass. And then tomorrow, Monday, is the vernal equinox across the northern hemisphere. That is the astronomical arrival of spring, and that is when if you were standing at the equator, the sun would be directly overhead tomorrow in the early afternoon at 1:24 p.m. Alaska Daylight Time. So now we're going to continue to see the length of daylight increasing and our sun angle increasing until the solstice in the third week of June. One other quick note, a minor geomagnetic storm with enhanced high latitude aurora may be possible, if not this Sunday night, Monday night, March 20th into the 21st. And we're at a favorable moon phase, new moon, so skies will be good and dark if you have clear conditions, because that new moon occurs on Tuesday, the 21st. So on the satellite imagery, we have a curl in the clouds. There's one low pressure circulation that's bringing snow showers and things along the eastern Kenai, a trough lagging here along the Panhandle. But behind me, look at this well-developed storm. The low pressure center now is east of Shimya in through the lower southwestern Bering Sea. It's going to be tracking northeastward to just west of St. Lawrence Island Monday night into Tuesday morning. And this occluded front ahead of it is going to pull and just slam into the southwest and west coast of the mainland, producing a winter storm and blizzard conditions at times. So again, we can see the curl in the clouds, very well developed storm system that's going to bottom out somewhere around 955 millibars or so. Here's the center this afternoon. A warm front initially ahead of it, but this colder air will quickly catch up and occlude that front, so that by late tonight, early in the pre-dawn hours of Monday morning, we have that front already approaching the lower Yukon Delta, and with it will come falling snow as well as blowing and drifting snow. And on Monday afternoon, the low continues to sit there just west of St. Lawrence Island, with the front pushing inland, a secondary low developing in the north end of the Alaska Peninsula, followed by a weaker low working its way just north of the central Aleutians, and that'll pass into the North Pacific south of the Alaska Peninsula, and then help spin up another low on the western and central Gulf by late Tuesday and Wednesday. So Tuesday afternoon, you can see that low there, and eventually by Wednesday will be emerging into the central Gulf, and this system will begin to fill and weaken. But still, some nasty winter conditions lingering across the western coast, especially Tuesday morning. But conditions should begin to improve by Tuesday evening and Tuesday night. Temperatures are generally going to be above freezing across much of the Panhandle, but a bit chillier. Any clearing, you can see lows dip down well into the teens, some single figures, Copper River Basin. Back up above freezing along the Kenai, including Anchorage Bowl up toward near Talkeetna. 40s across the Panhandle on Monday. Tuesday morning, again, lows generally below freezing here, south central, near freezing across the inner channels of the Panhandle, and then temperatures Tuesday afternoon should get back up above freezing, upper 30s to near 40 from Anchorage southward, and certainly back into the 40s. Can't even rule out an isolated 50 in the Panhandle. The coldest temperatures that have been residing up along the Arctic coast and North Slope have begun to relax. We are going to see some warmer air pivoting northward with these couple of systems that have managed to work their way further north. So low single digits above and a bit below zero Monday morning, and then back up around freezing at Fairbanks and areas just to the west of the Alaska Range. You can see temperatures steady to slowly rising along areas of the west coast as that front pushes eastward, and winds shift from southeast to south and then southwest behind the front. Temperatures Tuesday morning will be elevated in the 20s here around Norton Sound. Still some isolated readings a bit below zero there in the far north and east. And then temperatures Tuesday, milder air will spread up through the Yukon Valley and getting temperatures in many areas back up to in the mid to upper 30s. And then along the southwest tonight, still temperatures dipping down into the teens, Bethel and Anvik, generally above freezing along the Aleutians. And then on Monday afternoon, temperatures are going to be steady to slowly rising across the southwest back up into the mid 30s, with some lower 40s along the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Tuesday morning lows generally in the 20s, a little below freezing. in the southwest, but by Tuesday afternoon, we still expect temperatures just behind the front to be a little cooler, but near freezing the further you go up the Kuskokwim and especially the middle Yukon Valley. And a quick check of the temperature outlook, March 25th through the 29th. We expect temperatures to average a bit below normal across South Central, centered on the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, on over through the southeast, while temperatures may end up a bit above normal, especially along the Brooks Range North Slope. But more importantly, we're expecting precipitation to average above normal here for the end of the month across the western portion of the mainland, which could imply we could see some other storm systems with moisture coming in off of the Bering Sea.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's get into your aviation weather now. If you have a flight planned either on Monday or Tuesday, the main weather feature we're watching is a powerful low working its way up through the central Bering, and then it'll be passing just west of St. Lawrence Island to be sitting along the far eastern Russian coast by Monday night into Tuesday. And along and ahead of this system, an occluded front will be pushing in through the west and southwest sides of the state, bringing strong winds along with blowing and drifting snow. Winter storm warnings are in effect for areas of the lower Yukon Delta and along the Seward Peninsula and out over St. Lawrence Island. We will see some storm force winds out over the Bering, as again, this is a potent system. As it works its way eastward, a secondary triple point low will develop and be situated kind of between Kodiak Island and the Kenai Peninsula as we get into Monday night and Tuesday. Another little system, not as strong, will be working its way east-southeastward, just north of the central Aleutians and then across the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula and reemerge into the Gulf and spin up another area of low pressure by midweek. So the pattern will remain active. We'll see some of that energy and moisture trying to work its way inland. So along the south slopes of the Brooks Range, we can see IFR conditions along the Alaska Range and persisting areas of IFR along the Seward Peninsula, middle Yukon Valley, back toward the northern Bering Sea. By Tuesday afternoon, the frontal system certainly has weakened and energy pushed inland, but we have pockets of IFR, northeastern Gulf, northern Panhandle, also down along areas of the central south slopes of the Brooks Range toward the Bering Strait, and then also just on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Past conditions Monday, Anatuvik Pass, IFR in the morning, giving way to VFR conditions. Adigan Pass, same thing, IFR giving way to VFR. As we go down toward the western arm of the Alaska Range, MVFR conditions should become IFR as that front and moisture pushes further east. We'll get that secondary triple point low forming, as I mentioned, there toward the western Gulf at the entrance of Cook Inlet. And then Monday, as we round up the Alaska Range, MVFR to IFR conditions at Rainy Pass. Windy Pass should generally see marginal visual flight rules for the day. Isabel hanging on to VFR conditions, and Mentasta may start off with MVFR conditions in the early part of the day, giving way to VFR. Tanita Pass, also some MVFR conditions in the morning, giving way to VFR. And Portage Pass is expected to hold on to MVFR conditions on Monday. Chilkoot and White will see IFR conditions early in the day and then give way to VFR conditions as we go into the afternoon. Freezing levels at the surface run out along the central Bering between St. Matthew and St. Paul, and then dip down along the Alaska Peninsula, riding up along Kodiak Island, the Kenai Peninsula, north and Gulf, on into the inner channels of the Panhandle. Freezing levels do bump up a bit above 2,000 feet across the central southern Panhandle, and then back to the west. The frontal system, it is occluded, even though it's pushing on in to the southwestern coast. We see freezing levels behind that bump up above 2,000 feet across the eastern Aleutians. Icing threat will be mainly along this frontal system, above 2,000 feet, lower Chukchi eastern Russian coast, Seward Peninsula above 3,000 feet, lower Yukon Delta above 4,000 feet, Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay areas, and then above 6,000 feet along and south of the Alaska Peninsula, where there could be some considerable moderate icing associated with the precipitation along that front. Upper level jet stream winds are strongest down here along and south of the Aleutian chain, jet core in excess of 110, 120 knots. At 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, we have a closed low circulation here over the northwestern Bering Sea with a broad band of winds aloft 45 to 55 knots from lower Chukchi Sea along the west-southwest coast all the way down to south of the Aleutians. At 3,000 feet, we find that circulation just west of St. Lawrence Island and just very close to where the actual surface low circulation is. But look at the strong winds aloft, just a few thousand feet off the surface winds in excess of 50 to around 60 knots. So that's why there will be a considerable amount of turbulence, isolated to widespread severe turbulence from areas of the Bering Strait down along the southwest coast back into the central Bering Sea, generally the surface to 3,000, 4,000 feet. And we see considerable moderate turbulence extending along the Aleutians up into the Alaska Range and on the western half of the Brooks Range.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, oh, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now I'm old enough in the weather satellite business.
You can remember when.
The new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition. Right. Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago. No. It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellite is launched, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect. Yes. And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care? Okay. You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin? It sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah. You know what, though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey, but they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job, and it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Absolutely does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite.
Okay.
But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image, thanks to the processing techniques. Yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and more. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's look at the sea ice edge to begin our marine weather segment. Most notably, a lot of ice in place here, lower Chukchi Sea through Norton Sound and the Bering Strait. We're going to have some gale force winds of 35 to 45 knots on Monday out of the southeast. So there is going to be the shifting of ice, the potential for some polynyas opening up, along with some of the shore-fast ice being pulled away, as well as the potential for blizzard conditions at times, with a fair amount of blowing and drifting snow accompanying a strong low and a frontal system. Along the southwest coast and along the ice edge, storm force winds coming in off the Pribilof Islands. We expect blizzard conditions along areas of the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas. So again, the ice here is going to begin to retreat northward, and there could also be some areas where the shore-fast ice pulls away as the result of those strong winds. Areas of the southeast panhandle, winds for the inner channels generally out of the north-northwest around 10 knots, waves just a couple of feet. The outer coast winds will be generally out of the northwest around 20 knots, with waves running 5 feet within 15 nautical miles of shore. On Tuesday, winds will generally be out of the southeast 10 knots through the middle and upper channels with a couple of foot waves. The outer coast, look for south winds to turn more easterly once you get from around Yakutat toward Cape Suckling, and they pick up a bit with waves up that way 8 to 10 feet, but generally running right around 5 to 6 feet along the outer areas here of the western panhandle. Now, for the northwestern Gulf, winds southeast 10 knots with a couple foot waves in Prince William Sound, but winds southeasterly 25 to 30 knots at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 7 to 9 feet. For Tuesday, easterly winds to 30 knots in Prince William Sound with 7-foot waves. North winds coming down the length of at least upper middle Cook Inlet at 15 knots, and then south winds 25 to 30 30 knots from the entrance of Cook Inlet to northeast of Kodiak with waves of 6 to 9 feet. Kodiak Island on Monday will see winds out of the southeast picking up from 20 to 30 knots, but as we go out the length of the peninsula, behind an occluded front, winds turn southwesterly to 30 knots, waves 7 to 10 feet on the North Pacific side, but as high as 11 to 19 feet north of Cold Bay, as the strongest winds will be curling up through this region of the Bering Sea. And then winds on Tuesday generally out of the south around 20 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, but turn back more toward the west-northwest around 25 knots as you get out toward False Pass, Cold Bay, with waves 9 feet on the North Pacific side and 12 to 13 feet on the Bering side. Strongest winds will pass through the Aleutian chain tonight, early Monday morning. For Monday during the daylight hours, we expect generally west-southwest gales around 35 knots, especially eastern and central Aleutians, and waves could be up around or just over 20 feet away from the shelter of the islands either side, North Pacific or Bering side. And on Tuesday, gale force winds of 35 to 40 knots will hold up out of the west for the eastern and central Aleutians, falling off a little bit more toward 30 knots here west of Adak. Waves will come down slightly into the mid and high teens, still near 20 feet south of Nikolsky. And along the southwest coast and the ice edge, as the occluded front slams into the southwest coast with snow, blowing snow, blizzard conditions, we expect storm force winds around the Pribilof Islands at 55 knots with some locally higher gusts with the passage of the front. And then with these strong southeast to south winds of 40 to 45 knots, there's certainly the potential for some polynyas to open up and ice to shift around. By Tuesday, winds do come down, still holding up around 25 knots from the south there along the Yukon Delta up into Norton Sound, and westerly 25 to 30 knots from St. Matthew down to St. Paul. And then finally, the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, and once you get north side of St. Lawrence Island, 35 to 45 knot southeasterly winds. So again, the potential for the ice to shift, for polynyas to open up, and for sure fast ice to pull away. Winds not as strong up here along the Arctic coast, south to easterly component to the wind around 20 knots. And on Tuesday, those winds come down further along the Arctic coast, generally around 10 knots out of the southeast. But still, we're seeing winds 30 to maybe as high as 35 knots from the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait and on the north side of St. Lawrence Island and the west side of the Seward Peninsula. Deep low late tonight, early Monday morning around 956 millibars, lifting to just west of St. Lawrence Island by Monday afternoon with the central pressure right around 961 millibars.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.